the first times I spoke to you about Palestine. Because I remember this very well. You did a gig in Liberty Hall in Dublin, and you very gracefully let me open up the show for you. And that was on the 26th of September, 2023. So it was about 2 weeks before October 7th. And I remember talking to you about this because I live in Germany. I'd always been engaged with the topic. I'd always had sympathy for the Palestinian cause. I always thought it was outrageous what was happening there. It was very refreshing to hear someone agree with this, because I just very rarely do I meet people in my social circles back there who would agree with it. And we're both talking about it, and we're both kind of agreeing on it. And I remember very vividly seeing the news a week later and seeing what happened to you specifically. So how, in your experience, how did the events of that day change your life?
October 7th?
Yeah.
At the end of that tour that you were on with me, I was in Wales, I think, on the final day of it, which was actually October 7th. So I was at a Cardiff City match with my buddy Sully, and I didn't have my phone with me, so he was just on his phone and he was going through the news. And I think as soon as I saw what was happening, my first thought was oh, this is going to be absolute hell is going to be rained down on these people, because I suppose if you've been following it a little bit, we all kind of anticipated there was going to be a great response. I don't think anybody, even experts, anticipated it would end up being a 13-month genocide and ongoing, and it would have complete Western media and political class complicity. But my instant feeling that day was oh shit. And actually, because I'm sure people don't know me, I am a comedian, believe it or not. I'm not saying anything funny right now, but like Dan, I work in comedy, and I initially thought, I have no business here at all. There's no place for comedy in the midst of the opening days of a genocide. But I'm sure we'll get into it. I found then that actually my type of satire, my Palestinian friends were getting on to me saying, you actually need to get in here, and how right they were proved to be, because anybody who's got any kind of a voice on social media have been the only people standing up for what have to be the most oppressed and forgotten people on earth. And they're up against a few lads and girls on fucking Instagram are up against CNN, BBC, and all other mainstream news outlets.
So were you hesitant at first?
Totally.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't think of anything funny.
Yeah.
It's grand to be making political satire about the British Empire when you're doing sketches about, the 19th century occupation of India. At least there's a bit of distance from the horror. I'm not saying for a moment that the British Empire is all skits and giggles. It's horrific. But the distance of history makes it, okay, I can get in here and I can satirize it. And we're all laughing from a kind of a distance. When you're making political satire about something that's ongoing and there's an annihilation and mass murder going on and children are being murdered. Yeah. But it was a good Palestinian friend of mine in Dublin said, you'll just lampoon the Israeli propaganda. It's not like you're going to be mocking. So once I had their blessing, then I got involved. But for the first 2 weeks, I was just kind of numb. Because I'm not making myself out to be, a dyed-in-the-wool Palestinian. I'm like everyone else. I was reading it out of a book. Yeah. And it was an abstract thing for me before I made Palestinian friends. I was an anti-imperialist. I wasn't necessarily anti-Zionist or whatever. But yeah, when they said, look, get in and lampoon the propaganda, and luckily, Israeli propaganda just happens to be the most laughable, if it wasn't so horrific that it's being used as a tool for complicity and genocide and manufacturing consent for genocide. They are ridiculous people, that they're the gap between what they think that the average person will perceive from their bullshit versus what they're actually seeing. I mean, there was a case of them detailing a map on a wall where they said, here's basically the terrorists are taking turns here and that's all their names. And it was the days of the week in Arabic. Yeah. So they counted that anyone watching that news report would not have Arabic, or if they did have Arabic, no one would listen to them. It's a good theory, to be fair.
I think there's a lot of powerful stuff in that, especially you saying that you had a Palestinian friend who kind of told you it's a good thing to satire it, because I think there's a lot of strength in satire, especially on dark times. Yeah. I think that's when it's the most important, really. So I'm very interested in that. But before we get back to Palestine, I'd kind of like to reel it back for a second. Because when I first met you, you weren't known for your Palestine activism. You were known for your British Empire activism, really.
Being anti-English.
Yeah, being anti-English. And I remember when I first met you, the and we would talk about this as well, of like how in the media people would often try and get you with like IIA questions or get like quick gotcha questions. How have you found that your reputation or how you getting covered has changed ever since you've gotten more into Palestine activism?
Not much.
No,
because like the hats have just changed, but the accusations are the same, really. I would like to clarify that I'm not anti-English at all, and I was being playful there. I would be anti. Yeah, that's fine, and that's your right.
Fuck you, Thomas.
That's your birthright, actually, as a German. So in the south of Ireland, as you know, it's quite different in the north. But in the south of Ireland, we're very squeamish, I think, about talking about our colonial past at all. It's become a very kind of consumerist, kind of aspirational middle-class society here, where bringing up what the Brits did is a little bit awkward for everyone. So if you have the temerity to mention or want to seek further understanding or clarity about the fact that we were a colonised nation and all that history, people will perceive you as a mad Irish Republican and a supporter of the IRA. A little bit. Now, that probably sounds ridiculous, but actually, again, in the political class and media class, I've definitely been... and friends of mine have been kind of sidelined as he's a mad rahead, we don't take him seriously.
Yeah.
But actually what's happened through the prism of solidarity with Palestine, we're getting closer, I think, to an understanding of what it was like in the north for people who actually went through colonialism just very recently. In fact, they're still going through it in many ways because they're still occupied. Yeah. So now the accusations I would get would be I'm a pro-Hamas terrorist sympathiser.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing, really. I just have a different outfit.
The letters around.
Exactly. Yeah. It used to be a balaclava. Now it's a keffiyeh. Whatever. I don't give a shit, to be honest. I am pro-resistance, though. I would say that proudly, and also like and resistance to occupation is enshrined in international law. So it's not like I'm this radical mad lefty. I'm just somebody who adheres to international law.
I get that, but that makes for bad headlines.
That's what I tell my friends. I'm just an international law guy, you know.
I want to just to kind of set up the context. Could you give us a quick breakdown of how you think the Republic of Ireland gained its independence? What were the most monumental moments?
Water balloons and satire, clown workshops and water balloons. No, well, I mean, the Irish people were fighting off Thomas's people.
He's British, by the way. He'll be on the panel later.
Thomas is literally my English foil. I bring him everywhere with me, and it's when people are like, "Oh, he's Anglophobic," I go, "But Thomas, Thomas is my good friend."
Yeah, he's like your black friend, is he?
He's my black friend. Yeah, a lot of my friends are Thomases. But Ireland, through one way or another, has been fighting British colonialism for 800 years, as people may or may not be familiar. Like a lot of resistance movements, it sprouts up and then it's clamped down on and it's destroyed, and then it grows roots again and it pops up and it flowers and it flourishes and then it's destroyed again. And that was going on for, as I say, like centuries. With 1916 and the Easter Rising, if people have heard of that, there was a few Irish insurgents or volunteers that would have been members of the old IRA, the so-called good IRA. There's a bad IRA in the north that I'm more familiar with. The good IRA guys had this insurgency. It was largely unsupported by the general population. A lot of people at that time were like, we just want fucking, food. We want somewhere to live. Yeah. The British, they're bad, but like, come on, will we really do better? We had a very kind of colonial mindset. Long story short, the British carried out such atrocities against the volunteers that it switched public opinion. We had Michael Collins and all that jazz. We ended up in an Anglo-Irish war, and that brought the British Empire to the point of negotiation. And then with threat of violence, we were kind of forced into partition, which meant that the 6 counties in the north would remain part of what then became the United Kingdom, so part of Britain, and the 26 counties had the beginnings of freedom and became the Free State. And there's no way that I think Collins and the others would have accepted that if it wasn't for Lloyd George at the time basically saying, you're going to have an absolute annihilation if you don't accept the terms at this point. And then we had another 100 years of an absolute shit show with half the people in the north being brutally oppressed up until 1969, when most people regained consciousness of the story, because late 69, 70, the IRA start doing bad things. But in the south of Ireland, you never hear of those kind of, it's almost like a black hole of history between 22 and 69. It's just like, we don't know what happened, but then suddenly the IRA were just like, we love murdering people. And then they just started murdering people randomly to try and, I don't know, sate their insatiable desire for killing.
So what you're saying is you don't support all of the IA's activities?
Which
I
one?
remember
Which one?
reading in the news that you're a big fan.
Of which IRA? I love the new one. The old one are a bit tedious for me, I think.
In what way do you think that colonial mindset or the colonial history of Ireland is still affecting society and politics in Ireland today? Do you think it still has an effect?
Totally.
Yeah?
Definitely, because we're still, I think, like with Sinn Féin, for instance, in the last election, we had Sinn Féin on the rise, and they looked like they were gaining mainstream popular support. But the first moment that they're caught up in something that's not generally appealing, they lose that support again from middle class Ireland. Again, in the north, they have big support because they've had to rally and organise in a kind of a green uniformity against orange and against British oppression. In the south, again, Sinn Féin are so tied up with the idea of the Northern IRA. I think average people in the south kind of feel a bit squeamish about the fact that the north resisted. Basically, in the south, we were kind of brought up to feel like we got our independence. The north, up in the north, they keep fighting each other. We really wish they would just stop it. It's very embarrassing, and it has nothing to do with us. And I think that mindset, which was espoused by the Irish Times and RTE, that is, propaganda is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, it's that sort of survivor bias, isn't it? That we
survivor
made it through
bias.
it.
Yeah, definitely.
That makes complete sense. And I always found that, because from my perspective, right, I came over to this country, I didn't know a lot about the history. But then pretty much immediately when I came over, I realized a lot of people in my age group are very pro Sinn Féin. But a lot of people who are older than my age group will basically say, oh, Sinn Féin are tied to the IRA.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Because I don't know the history well enough.
Well, younger people, the Fine Gael hierarchy and the Fianna Fáil, which are the two traditional ruling parties in Ireland, they will kind of spread this narrative that young people don't understand their history. But what they actually mean by that literally is they don't accept their version of history. They don't accept the Fine Gael narrative. They're just reading books independently of the books they've been told to read. So young people actually understand their history much more, and they're seeing Sinn Féin. Nobody that I know who's a young person necessarily endorses violence. I am obviously being playful when I say I would never support IRA atrocities that killed innocent people, but I understand the need for resistance when you're an occupied nation. And I think young people are much more open-minded about that kind of stuff, and they're not bogged down in the kind of Fine Gael finger wagging. I'd love to know, I was actually saying to my partner before I came out, I'd love to know who is voting for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil in Ireland. I'd love to meet them and talk to them, because I don't know anyone. Do you know anyone? And yet I think they're 35% of the polls. In Ireland at the moment, guys, if people don't know it, we have an ongoing housing crisis going back nearly 2 decades. They're not representing people who want to buy a house in Ireland. They're not representing people who want to rent in Ireland. We've got child homelessness levels akin to the famine. Businesses are closing all over Cork all the time, really popular, successful cafes and restaurants are closing.
There's no one in Cork Undressed, it's a bad time.
Yeah, exactly. Look, there's no one here tonight. Before Fine Gael got in power, this place was mobbed. But I would just love to know, who are they representing? I'm literally, I'd love to reach out. I just don't understand. If they're not representing renters, people wanting to buy houses, people who want the genocide to end in Gaza, people who want their parents not to be lying on trolleys in hospitals. It must be people who are just, I'm all right jacks, we call them. Well, actually, people in the north call people in the south who didn't give a fuck about the north when it was going through what it was going through. I'm all right jack.
I was going to ask about this. Do you think that's related to the influence of the colonial past? That people maybe have that mindset of I'm doing all right, so I don't need to change anything.
Absolutely, it's the colonised mindset. But what I would just love to say to those people who are going to vote Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael again, this society is already dysfunctional, but it's going to completely fall apart if you keep voting for these parties. I know you hate the poor, right? You hate the poor and you hate the riffraff, but you need them, because who's going to do your piece of shit jobs in golf clubs and who's going to serve you your lattes? If you don't let the poor organise and have some sort of a political power, they're going to emigrate or take their lives.
Yeah.
You can't just, your lattes will go cold. That's what I'm saying to Dawkie.
I feel like you're talking to me, and I just want to say, as a poor person, I do hate the other poors.
Well, you see, Dan, you to me are rural. And
I'm rural.
I think there's a big question mark over the rural. Because you're not working class. You can go either way. And all I'll say to you is Fine Gael have traditionally looked after the rural communities of Ireland.
I know who
so if you were back home, you'd be voting for whatever the German equivalent of Fine Gael is. I don't even want to imagine that hell.
I like to do this when we have guests on, just because I kind of want to learn for myself as well. In your own terms, how would you define the terms Irish independence and Irish neutrality?
Irish independence would be about Ireland positioning itself on the global stage as looking after its own interests, culture, traditions, preserving them, but also being integrated with the cultures and traditions of around the world, but not giving up on what it is to be Irish, uniquely Irish, in lieu of, co-mingling with other cultures, but standing on its own 2 feet and not being too tethered to any independent or any group outside Ireland. So, for instance, we don't have Irish independence because we're so utterly tethered to US multinationals, in my opinion. And what was the other one?
The other one was Irish neutrality.
Neutrality. Well, the Fine Gael types, I'm not big into Fine Gael. I don't know if is that coming across.
I couldn't tell.
I'm not a big Fine Gael guy.
You've been a fall guy, are you?
They're definitely trying to wander us into NATO. And that would be the final death knell in what has always been a tenuous enough claim to Irish sovereignty. But the one thing that could be funny there, though, in my opinion, is there's a small but decent chance that Donald Trump will take the US out of NATO. And I would love to see that. Because then it's just a bunch of Europeans who've been putting nothing into their military budgets going, oh fuck. Okay, what do we do now that daddy's left? So I'd almost like to see Ireland in NATO with America gone. We've got to go, oh fuck.
America was gone. They never joined.
Trump gives me some hope on a geopolitical level. I know he's not a good dude, and I feel sorry for people in America, but if I was there, I would rather have seen Trump win for the sake of geopolitics than
he's
Harris.
Super heavily pro-Israel, isn't he? He's even more than others.
He is
the most pro-Israel politician in the race.
Here's what I think my forefather Blind Boy would say in this particular scenario. Here's my hot take on Trump. I feel Trump is an egoist, and I feel he's going to be a transactional president, and I feel like if the new president of Iran says something nice about his tie, you could find Trump going, I think the Iranians are okay. And there's at least that kind of left field possibility with him, whereas with Harris it's just going to be it's a pity Biden died, because now I don't know exactly what he would have done, but it would have been more of the same.
Yeah, I feel like his racism would overtake his Thai compliments.
Here's my second hot take. I don't think Trump is a racist. I don't. Just to clarify, I detest Trump and everything he stands for, but I think he's such an egoist. Okay, maybe in his bones he has completely racist bias, but I don't think he's motivated by race at all. He's motivated by who's saying and doing nice things about me today. He's a complete and utter narcissist. I think when you're so committed to yourself, you haven't even got round to deciding what races you like and you don't like.
I mean, I could see him being I'm great friends with any big leader, to be honest.
Totally, yeah.
That's what he does. But besides that, I would.
Guys, I didn't mean it about Trump. I take it back about. Guys, please don't leave on this note.
I'm sure they'll be back to lift their stuff, and if they aren't, it's your fault.
That's quite nice that they left. I like when people leave their stuff and they walk out of disgust. It's just, look, just take my bag.
Just to move off Trump, because I've incriminated you enough, how does the history of this country influence its people's opinions on the Gaza crisis, in your opinion?
Well, I'm a big... You charging your phone? Fair fox. That's I love it. It's a nice friendly atmosphere here. It feels like my front room.
There'll be more people in your front room.
Oh, I wish you would have left her phone. So again, I'm a big fan of the North, and I think the North has really shown has really led the way, particularly northern women. So I think, again, people are looking back in the history of the dehumanization, being labelled as terrorists when you have the temerity to try and organise and resist occupation and colonialism. What are the metrics? Of course, we got the black and tans. Famously, were transported from Ireland. The black and tans were condemned by everyone, including the King of England. And then they were literally transported over to Palestine. So I think the comparisons between the two are so pertinent because, again, I suppose, you know, the idea of there being a Jews and Muslim kind of thing. You get the same thing in Ireland with, particularly in the north, that conflict being reduced to being a Catholic and Protestant thing. Like, did you? This is a question I was going to ask you. So, if you did know anything of Ireland and you didn't know anything of the Troubles before you came here, what did you think was going on up in the north?
Well, from what I would have learned immediately, just because I got it taught to me by young people in Ireland, would have been like, oh yeah, there's these people that want to be English, and there's these people who want to have freedom. Basically, that was the two perspectives. Yeah,
that's actually quite accurate.
Yeah, that's all people. That's what I would learn, and when I looked into it, I kind of learned, yeah, that's what it is.
That's great. Yeah, because like I think
one of them really like flutes. That's the other thing I took away from it.
I think we both like flutes, but like, yeah, they're perhaps more skilled at kind of playing them. But yeah, I think from friends of mine outside of Ireland, the traditional thing I've heard anyway is like it's Catholics and Protestants. Why do they hate each other so much? Because they've they've got so much in common. But it was never about Catholics and Protestants. Just like I don't know a single Palestinian who has said to me, you know what, man, I just bloody hate Jews. I hate Jews. It doesn't exist.
No, I agree with you.
There's anti-Semitic people everywhere, of course. There's anti-Irish people everywhere, whatever. But you miss the point of what the central issue is in both Palestine and Ireland in those conflicts. It's settler colonialism and it's land grabbing. I mean, I don't think anybody in 17th century Ireland was kind of going, oh my God, I fucking hate these bloody English or Protestants, or did Protestantism exist then? But it was like, I just hate the lad who's taken my house and, physically assaulting my wife.
I think it's, we'll talk about propaganda a bit in a minute, but I think it's just more useful for people that they can make blanket statements about groups of people, you know? That's the same with the Catholic and Protestant, it's the same with the Palestinian and the Israeli. If you can pretend the whole population of people has the same opinions, it's more effective for propaganda, even though it has nothing to do with reality.
Yes.
I think that's the way it always manifests itself.
And you're painting your opponent as a racist.
Yeah.
So it's really good for the BBC or CNN to kind of, trot out the idea that Palestinians are anti-Jewish and that supporters of Palestine are anti-Jewish. And again, that's totally in the mainstream. Like, I can't believe, I'm sure we'll get onto it, but I can't believe that Ursula von der whatever line and her buddies are kind of painting activists as anti-Semitic. I think she said as well that October 7th was a Jew-hating terrorist attack.
The thing you need to understand about Ursula, the thing you need to understand about Ursula is that she's been hated by all Germans for like fucking years. Like she's probably the most unpopular person in Germany ever. So she has to cling on to any cause that like in any way will make her look good.
It just breaks my heart what you guys are doing in the last year, as I've said to you. Like, I just love Germans so much. You're part of it, man. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. No, I don't blame you, but why is Germany doing this, like?
Yeah. It's for us it's an interesting thing because in our country it is such a controversial topic because we have been indoctrinated our entire time growing up that we have to support the Israeli government no matter what they do. So in our education we learn that that's our mission as a country, which in my opinion you should never blindly support any government no matter what they do. It doesn't matter what government it is. As soon as you blindly start supporting government, they're going to start getting away with fuck shit,
And I think we've talked about this before, but do you think then it's a kind of a thing of fear? So it's a fear to be seen as potentially anti-Semitic if you're too pro-Palestine?
Yeah, 100%. And
it must be mental as an Irish person living there, is it? Like, is it?
And I think even more so for my wife is German, and for her the same. Like you say, this idea that you cannot, disagree, but saying that it's not like you said blindly follow whatever. You're like, okay, look, I'm not gonna say fuck Israel, fuck it. Of course not. It's like I'm on both sides. I'm like, fuck war, fuck that.
Yeah.
I think that's
But in that, you're already saying, well, now you're saying fuck Israel because you say fuck, and it's wild.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Just to add, like the level you said, like indoctrinated, right? It's like it's insane how we learn in school how to behave and what to believe and like what you can't say.
Wow.
So like this situation that we're in right now, like I don't like at all what I see what the government is doing, but I wouldn't know what the right response, like like. Of course, I know what the right response is, but like it's just you can't do this.
I know what you mean. Yeah, there's almost no room to respond in another way. Like, I get it.
To bring it back to Ireland and stuff, so I've kind of learned our way and how this is so important. And I find it really odd that the English people don't have the same sort of attitude. We look at the colonialism and how much they've affected the world, and you think they don't learn the same thing in school.
No.
So the Germans is so important. Then you look at the
That is such a good point.
and the things that they do, and it's a joke to them.
I've said that to you for years, and that's why I feel for the Germans so much, because I do feel that they've become European scapegoats, and then again, and also there's a kind of a complicity from the other European states that Germany did a real bad, they're really bad, and the rest of us are kind of civilized. We don't have to talk about French colonialism. We don't have to talk about what the British did. And like, I remember the first time I visited Berlin, I couldn't believe that there were all these monuments effectively to German war guilt. It's great to learn from your mistakes, but it's shoved down the throats of Germans by, I think, sometimes largely other European nations, putting all the scapegoating for a history of colonialism in this part of the world on the Germans, and you'd be hard pushed to find a single monument in London acknowledging anything that they have done around the world. And I think the British are like top of the list, who should be indulging in that level of kind of reflection of their ills and war guilt.
I would fully agree with you, but the one thing that I always think about is that I think it's very good to be very open with the past.
Yeah.
I do, however, think that the attitude that the country has fosters of like we have to support Israel no matter what because of the past, I think that's very dangerous.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a very dangerous precedent.
It's the logical conclusion of having this much war guilt is that you've now gone so far the other way. It's kind of counterproductive in a way because you've accidentally endorsed another genocide whilst ringing.
No, not accidentally, completely on purpose. It's not accidentally at all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's accidentally at all. I'll actually move on to this now because it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about. Because me and you know this, we've talked about this before, is that this did not start on October 7th. That's the narrative that you always hear is this started on October. It didn't. There were thousands of Palestinians murdered way before October 7th for years. And I think a big part, and this is kind of why I want to get on propaganda, is that we in this part of the world, we've kind of accepted that dehumanizing Middle Eastern countries is fine. And that's I think what happened in Germany very heavily. So we got to a point where every time in the German media, if you see a Middle Eastern country, the coverage would be like, oh, they all hate women, they all hate LGBTQ people, and they all support this, which is bullshit. That's not. There's individuals in all of these countries. There's gay people in the Middle Eastern country. There's the feminists in the Middle Eastern countries who fight a very hard fight, And I find that maybe what I'm trying to get to is, in your opinion, has there ever been a conflict where propaganda has played such a massive role as in this one?
I suppose I'd be a big Noam Chomsky guy, and like he wrote Manufacturing Consent, I think, in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So I think all conflicts, he would probably say propaganda, mass media has played a huge role, but I don't think we've ever seen the complicity so open. I mean, with Amsterdam, what happened in Amsterdam the other night? So a bunch of Israeli hooligans went to Amsterdam with all the entitlement of a colonial class of people. I remember on my first holiday being in Prague when I was like after doing the Leaving Cert, and I saw these British lads walking through town on a stag, pissing, starting fights with locals or whatever. That's where my animosity towards
British people,
British culture, literally, because I saw it with my own eyes. I was like, fuck, I've never seen Irish people behave like this. There must be something in our mindset where we don't feel like we own the plane. To my knowledge, they've never owned the Czech Republic.
What were they doing then?
They were pissing on churches, they were starting fights with locals, they were like smashing bottles on the ground. I was like, this is a beautiful city with an extraordinarily rich history. How could you behave like this?
I can't believe you're still friends with Thomas after that.
Look, to be fair, that was Thomas's stag. It was a long time ago. He was pissed up. He'd been.
But that's something I'm very interested in because it's really down your wheelhouse. It's kind of what you've been about for the last couple of years. Is that social media has kind of naturally started filling that gap.
Yeah.
Where we all know that we're getting fed certain narratives. Every publication has money behind it. Every publication, every general news outlet has an agenda. That's just common sense. So I'm very interested in how important you think social media is for activism today.
It's huge. I mean, so just to finish the point on Amsterdam. So like these bunch of thugs come from Israel. They start causing trouble there. They rip down Palestinian flags. They cause more criminal damage, and they're trying to intimidate locals because they're entitled people, just like the British I've been talking about. They end up getting their arses handed to them, and some Dutch Moroccan lads kick the shit out of them. They wake up the next morning. Now, if I was a soccer hooligan and I went to Amsterdam looking for fights and I got the shit kicked out of me, I'd come home going, I needed to look at my drinking. That's probably what I would reflect on. They woke up the next morning and the President of the United States of America was on their side.
Yeah.
Like, that's how fucking farcical it's gotten. Suddenly a bunch of lads on the piss causing trouble in Amsterdam is akin to the pogroms of Jewish people a century ago. Like, it's a fucking farce. It's an absolute farce. And all media behind it, CNN, BBC, don't question it. They put it out, and eventually it was wasn't it like a 14-year-old boy working with Dutch media, recorded everything and put it out. We're just like, these people went looking for trouble. You know what I mean? There are no pogroms,
I found that very interesting personally because I kind of gave it a few days after that happened, and then I tried to collect resources and kind of try and see how it was covered everywhere. And I found it very fascinating because during that whole riot, it ended up with 5 people being hospitalized and being released in the following days.
Yeah.
In the same time span, about, I think it was like 43 civilians got bombed in Palestine. No coverage about that.
Because
no one cares.
As you say, they don't count. Like, you're not comparing like with like in the Western media. Like, when Palestinian people are murdered, they're just numbers, they're just statistics. When IOF soldiers are killed, we hear their story, we see their pictures, and like all loss of life is tragic, I think.
Yeah.
But the Western media is basically telling us that these people over here kind of deserve to die because they're terrorists and they're just brown and they're vaguely connected to 9/11 on some metric, whereas these people over here, they're more like us, they're more Western. It's complete fucking straight up settler colonial racism, and the world sees now, I think, what the West is like.
How do you think that, like, post 9/11 Islamophobia, which is widespread, I think if you have a critical mind about it at all, you kind of realize that there is widespread Islamophobia in the Western world. How do you think people can tackle that in their everyday lives? What's something people can do to try and counteract that? Because it's something that depresses me. That's genuinely depressed me.
Get to know some Muslims. Like, the friendships I've made with Palestinians in the last year, both online and in real life, have genuinely been the most enriching experiences of my life. Like, they're just extraordinary people.
Yeah.
They're extraordinary people. They have, without being patronizing, they have a resilience that I don't think anybody in the West understands. They're very like Irish people. They're fucking dark sense of humor. They're just beautiful, beautiful people. And if you get to know, I think, what is the way around somebody with a misogyny issue? Get to know some women, meet some women, get out of your fucking parents' bedroom and talk to some women. What's the way to get over your homophobia? Like, make friends with a gay person. It's not rocket science, and I think there's a beautiful thing between Ireland and Palestine, I think, that needs to be looked at, which is happening more and more. It's that ethnicity and race and religion is being completely transcended because we have an understanding of each other as colonized people who have had to really hold on with dear life to our sense of self, our language, our culture, and in their case, at the moment, their actual lives.
Yeah, 100%. I find this very interesting because I kind of would like to get your perspective. How would you contrast the way that the Palestinian crisis is covered on social media versus how it's covered in general media? Because I think the actual difference is stark, isn't it? It's very stark.
It's crazy. I mean, like, it's a pity Noam Chomsky is kind of slowing down because I think this is almost like the logical conclusion of everything that he was talking about.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it, certainly. And what's actually good, I think, is that the ordinary person who wouldn't have been particularly political beforehand and certainly wouldn't have been a mad lefty or anything, is looking at BBC and CNN, and then they're looking a little bit at what's happening on social media, and they're realising that, okay, these people are actually lying. Like, they're lying. And we know they're lying because, for instance, recently over 100 BBC journalists signed a letter condemning the level of bias going on at BBC.
Yeah,
like, there's
yeah.
good people everywhere, you know what I mean? Like, Al Jazeera have been covering the way in which the story is told, the use of language. Again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, like, Palestinians just die in the kind of passive, and Israelis are killed. They often take Israel. I've just done a sketch, and actually, which is coming out this week. Israelis are often removed from the idea of an airstrike. So it's just like an airstrike kills these Palestinians. We don't know who did it, you know, like, and that's from the top down. And actually, whilst you're right about social media, because you can stop people telling the truth. Motaz, I think, has like 17 million followers on Instagram. That's great because people want to hear the truth. But the man is being restricted, fucking unbelievable. Like, he gets what you call it, you know, when they give you like slaps on the wrist on social media. He has loads of them for promoting images containing nudity and all this fucking ludicrous stuff. If people want to see more about it, actually, Al Jazeera have just released a podcast with people who have left Meta because of the abject bias, and it's from the top down. That the algorithmic favouring of Israel is from the top down. They have this thing called like some sort of intranet where, you know, they can get onto each other, like working in Facebook. Hey, like, what's your day going? Or whatever kind of bullshit. The Arabs, the Palestinians working with Meta, who had lost family members, were not allowed send each other messages on the intranet there, offering each other condolences. They'd be deleted straight away. I think
wild.
It's sick.
Yeah.
It's fucking
that's
sick, man.
Wild.
Yeah.
I am actually curious about that, about Al Jazeera and Iran as well, because you had a bit of controversy when you went over there.
I love Iran.
Yeah, I know you do. I know
Yeah.
you do. And I remember reading a lot of stuff where people were accusing you of being like a mouthpiece for the Iranian or the Qatari government. So my question really is, what did you do with all the oil?
The money's great.
Yeah.
No, the money is
Why
brilliant.
didn't you buy me a coffee earlier today?
The money is unbearably good. Like, I wouldn't be a big fan of the Iranian regime, but again...
What? I'm so shocked.
I said big fan. I'm a fan.
You're telling me that just because you visit a country doesn't mean you support everything they do? That's crazy.
Well, this is it. And also, recently I didn't end up going, but I was almost going to San Diego to take part in a Green Party event in the US. And I thought it would have been funny if I had gone to them, maybe put out a little video going, geez, guys, I know you were like really hot and heavy about me going to Iran and questioning my morality there, like, but I'm going to the US.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do you have any issues there? You know, like, kind of supporting a genocide at the moment.
I think that means you're in favor of school shootings.
They've got more guns than people, like, you know, they've kind of intervened all over the world and caused mass murder, propped up dictators. But I think in the West, we just kind of focus again, it comes back to good old Islamophobia. I think you pointed it out. It's kind of fair game to mock Muslims.
Yeah.
Like, Sacha Baron Cohen wouldn't have a career if it wasn't fair game to mock Muslims in the West.
Yeah.
Imagine if he was a Muslim performer and all his shtick was about, like, Jews.
Yeah.
The Jewish people, you know what I mean? So, like,
if he portrayed like if he was a Middle Eastern woman portraying like a Israeli stereotype.
exactly, like, yeah.
It's super criticism.
I mean, the man is an absolute phenomenon in terms of success for, like, basically taking the piss out of backward Muslim countries, like.
Yeah.
So yeah, Muslims are fair game, and I think we're confronted with our own Islamophobia, I think, in the West over the last little while, and all that stuff is good. But you know what's weird, Dan, right? I was lucky enough to be speaking to Al Jazeera earlier on in this week, and all that stuff is cool, but it's also fucking absurd. Like, I can't believe that people are just sitting, like, and it's great that we are, but it's just mind-boggling to me that we're just sitting around having a chat. Like, it feels like all this stuff happened years ago and we're reflecting on a genocide.
Yeah.
It's going on right now,
It's going on right now.
You know, there's something really absurd about it and kind of unnerving that, you know, the good old West, like, can't do anything to stop people being mass murdered every day, like, you know.
100%.
So
I do have, and I kind of want to print on these two questions, because the discussion about what solution could be brought to the conflict is always filled with buzzwords. It's always people throw out buzzwords, one-state solution, two-state solution. What, in your opinion, is a realistic solution that could actually end the bloodshed?
Ooh, realistic. I can tell you what I'd like. people who are much more well informed on this. At the end of the day, I'm a lowly comedian with an interest in politics, but people who are much more informed on this, John Mearsheimers of the world, Palestinian academics that I like, have said that at this point, the idea of a two-state solution that's a laughing stock, and it's something that the West, particularly the US, has known for easily 20 years. It's the official thing to be like, look, two-state solution. There's good people on both sides. They just need to stop it. That's laughable because, I think a good analogy was talking about who's going to get what pieces of the pie. And in the midst of the conversation that's happening, one party's just taking the pie continually.
The whole pie.
So we have land grabs in the West Bank all the time. They've increased during the genocide, but it's been going on forever. And Israel has never stated where its borders are. It has never. It's the only country, to my mind, in the world that has never stated, okay, here's where our borders are. I think you're an intelligent guy, Dan. You'll probably understand the reasoning why that country has never decided what it's, because ultimately it wants all of Palestine to be part of that, and actually a lot more. So I think a one-state solution is the only thing that's, to say realistic that's very hopeful. The idea that there will be a Palestine, it breaks my heart to say it, and I wouldn't say it in front of my Palestinian friends right now, but the idea of a Palestinian state right now is laughable. It's wishful thinking. Where would that state be? And that's why, to go back to our good old friends in Fine Gael, it makes me feel like lashing this glass off my head when I see Simon Harris recognise a state that's dwindling before our eyes. It's such an easy win. Like, the Israelis will go, oh, I don't like that you've become the 142nd country to recognise Palestine. That's crazy radical. And then Ireland gets this reputation of being a pro-Palestine country, but behind the scenes, this Fine Gael government have overseen a 700% increase in dual-purpose goods between Israel and Ireland. Our trade is up 700%, our central bank is buying Israeli war bonds, and our airports are being used to transport weapons by US military to Israel. And this is all in a period where Simon Harris, the leader of this country, has admitted on camera that what's going on is a genocide. And this party is going to get back into power. So he's saying it's a genocide, but he's happy for trade to be through the roof with a country committing genocide. What moral bankruptcy is that?
So you think even hopes of a ceasefire or any resolution are very unlikely at the moment?
Well, if you were a fucked up, crazy man, I'm not for a moment saying that you are, right? And you were going around town smashing up shops and claiming that they're yours now and killing the people inside in those shops. And if the powers that be in this city were like, look, Dan, he's a bit of a hothead, but he's a good guy. Why would you stop doing that stuff? There's no actual pressure on Israel to stop. Why would they call a ceasefire now? Like, this is... I can't believe I'm saying this, but when you think of it, there's no meaningful diplomatic political pressure on this country to stop. If I was Israeli right now, if I was Netanyahu, I'd say, what else can we get away with? Let's start looking at Saudi Arabia. How big can this greater Israel be? If I was him right now, I'd be saying, I was on the verge of political obscurity a matter of a year ago. Now I'm looking at Israel becoming a modern colonial empire and just taking over the whole region, because what will give them complete peace and satisfactory defense capabilities? As long as they keep making enemies that can fight back, they've got a problem. So they might as well just take over the whole region,
you do have.
And who's going to stop them?
It is very depressing, but you do have a very good point.
Because if you say, sorry, Dan, I'll leave it at this. If you jump in and say, I think it's wrong that Israel has now taken over the whole of Lebanon, all of Palestine, Syria, and they're wandering into other areas in Saudi Arabia. If you say that you think that's wrong, you're an anti-Semite. And I will put that on Twitter, and from where you're from, not good, man, not a good look.
Hey, there's other Germans in this very small crowd, okay? I got myself.
But I don't know, man, I just call out if there's anyone listening, either online or in this room right now. I think there's a Holocaust happening in the Lebanon and Gaza. And as a friend of mine said to me recently, if you've got a big following on social media and you haven't said anything about Gaza, it's the equivalent of being in the 40s if social media was a thing. And you're talking about, I'm going on my trip to Vienna or whatever, and somehow ignoring what's going on in the camps, if you had knowledge of it. That's the equivalent.
I think it's even more important, though, that people are like people like yourself or other activists I follow, that they are speaking out about it, because it's the only way that this comes to light.
Yeah.
Like, it's so heavily biased in all the coverage that like social media is the only actual place where you can see how much death and destruction is being caused, you know?
The great screenwriters that I like, they all say, don't keep writing as if you're in the story. Write about other people and cultures and stuff.
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to it, we're all fathers.
Yeah.
We all want love. I think we should be thinking like screenwriters, great screenwriters, and think, even if you don't know much about Palestine or you don't know much about the region, every single day, men, women and children who just want to live are being mass murdered with our tax dollars and euros. If you're happy with that, great, go about your business. If you're not happy, get up off your arse and do something about it. We're in the middle of a Holocaust.
Do you think that as a society, and this might be a very idealist mindset, but do you think that as a society there's a future where we can stop accepting civilian casualties as inevitable?
I have to hope that there is, because otherwise we're done. Like, how could you live in a world? And I think, I don't know what's happening right now with the movement. It seems like, you know, there's a lot of people getting tired. There was a moment a few months ago where people who have more expertise than I do were saying that we're almost at that point, that tipping point. Apparently, if like 3.8% of a population are actively on the streets protesting something, a government can't withstand that. So there's moments where, I mean, there was 100,000 people marching in Dublin 4 months ago. If that was 200,000, if that was 300,000, like Fine Gael, they have to act if they're not going to get votes to get them back in. So I always believe that it is information. I think people who are still going to Starbucks and going to McDonald's, they simply do not have the information that these companies are complicit in genocide.
Yeah.
The other problem with social media, Dan, is that we're in a bubble. So I'm seeing 100 times a day that McDonald's are feeding IDF troops. But the people in McDonald's, I need to believe, are not seeing those things. So it comes down to information. I mean, social media, your posts can go viral, so you kind of think, oh, everyone knows that now, but they don't. Your bubble knows that. Mm-hmm. How we go beyond the bubble, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is that is kind of a good place to end it, because I have the same hope that one day, hopefully, we won't accept civilian casualties anymore. Because I think it's inhuman.
You have
to, just inhuman.
Actually, yeah, and then like the lefties that Chomsky and all these people, they might be cynical, but they always have hope. Like, I've seen him interviewed lots of times. He's like, do you have hope? Of course I have hope. The fact that he gets up every day and fights this shit gives me hope. So, yeah, there's always hope. And even if you're going down, you have to keep fighting.
100%. I think that's a very good note to end it on. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Everybody.
Thanks, guys.